There's no question that star receiver Ladd McConkey has had a big dip in production in 2025, but the good news is, after watching the tape, I can tell you he is still a very, very good player.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, man? Welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day as part of the #1 sports podcast network. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, Ladd McConkey is one of the best young wide receivers in the NFL after 2 seasons, especially after a rookie season where he put up some historic numbers in Chargers history. But the numbers have taken a little bit of a dip, and I think there's a couple of reasons we can point to as to why. But he's still a very, very good football player. On the offensive line, it's very clear that the Chargers have to make some changes, but Johnston seems like maybe he could be part of the future of the offensive line position. And we got to talk about some players that have been the most improved on offense and defense in 2025.
Yeah, and there's a couple of really good candidates, but today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. David, one of the more kind of surprising things that has happened so far this year is that Ladd McConkey, after his historic rookie season that you brought up, where he broke the Chargers franchise record for a rookie in receptions and receiving yards with 82 catches, 1,149 yards, and 7 touchdowns, basically a top 10 receiver in the league numbers-wise last season. And this year, it's a modest 66 catches, 789 yards, and 6 touchdowns, averaging 2 less yards per catch than he did as a rookie. And I think part of this is just everyone knows who Ladd McConkey is now, right? He put his name on the map a little bit. So he was always going to garner more attention than, what he saw last year when he was still a little bit more of an unknown commodity. Game plans are obviously centered around him in the passing game. I think teams know what he does well, but after watching, I don't see a noticeable difference. To me, he's still getting open. The route running to me hasn't regressed at all. Obviously, numbers-wise, he hasn't put up nearly as big of numbers as he has last year, but I think there's a lot of other causes for that. I still see him, and I'm watching him, and I think, okay, yeah, that's the same dude who had that historic rookie season.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, the movements, how crisp his routes are, those are still very apparent when you watch him. I mean, he's open all the time, but I also feel like one of the other major reasons why the numbers aren't quite as spectacular this year is because you have another wide receiver that has that chemistry and has a similar style of play that he does. And of course, I'm referring to Keenan Allen, who Keenan Allen and Ladd have pretty similar numbers, but last year without Keenan here, Ladd was, the big focal point on those third downs, trying to extend the chains. And, when Keenan's here, that chemistry with Justin Herbert is second to none. And so I feel like some of that attention, from Justin has gone away from Ladd to Keenan naturally. That's going to happen. They've worked together before. But as far as ability is concerned, there's nothing that I've seen that has changed the way I view Ladd McConkey as one of the young star receivers in the league.
Well, and that's really the crazy thing. He's played the same amount of games now because he played 16 games last year. He's now played in every game this year. And he only has 6 fewer targets. That's kind of the wild thing. You would have expected, because of Keenan Allen, because of some of the other guys we're going to talk about, that he would have had, way fewer targets than he had last year, when that's really not the case. I think the quality of the targets is obviously different, but you look at him, look at ESPN's receiver analytics. They still have him tied for 11th amongst wide receivers in the ability to get open. He's still getting open. He ranks 23rd in YAC. The YAC really hasn't changed either. Even though he hasn't had as many big break-off runs as we saw last year, he ranks 21st in yards after catch per catch this season at 4.7 yards after the catch per catch. Last year, he ranked 25th with 4.9 yards. This year, he's at 4.7. The big regression for him has come in the contested catch area, not making as many of the tough catches as he had last year. Last year, he caught 13 of his 21 contested catches, good for a 61.9% contested catch rate, which maybe always was going to be hard to repeat that, right? But that was 13th in the league. This year, he's only caught 3 of his 13 contested targets.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's 23.1%. basically third worst in the league percentage wise. So that is part of it. That's why, the targets can be similar, but the catches and the production with it hasn't been the same. But I do agree to your point where it is a lot more mouths to feed, because last year the Chargers only had 2 players hit 600 receiving yards for the season. This year the Chargers have 4 players with over 600 receiving yards. So it definitely has been a lot of the Chargers spreading the wealth, and the emergence of, Quentin Johnston's improvement, Keenan Allen coming back into this offense, and also Oronde, Gadsden working in the same part of the field.
Absolutely. I mean, all of these guys, with what they bring to the table and how they affect the offense, they kind of do different things that demand the football at times, right? Like they've kind of fallen into some very prototypical roles where, we didn't think Quentin Johnston was the take the top of the defense guy, but he has turned into that, with how they've used him and the plays that he's been able to make. He demands some targets in that part of the field. With Oronde Gadsden, he has, showed up and been a huge part of how they've been able to exploit defenses over the middle of the field. And obviously Ladd has that really unique ability to find the soft spots in the zone, like Keenan Allen can find the soft spots in the zone. They have some similar skill sets from that respect, but you have a lot of weapons, but that was part of the deal, right? You didn't want a situation where it was just Ladd McConkey getting 196 yards of receiving yards and everyone else getting barely nothing. You wanted to be able to diversify the offense, be able to spread it around, and now you have an offense where you have multiple weapons that a defense has to account for.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it has been spreading the wealth, which has kind of been a staple of, the Greg Roman offenses. There's a reason why not a ton of guys have been 1,000-yard receivers in Greg Roman's offense, and you've even heard receivers say they don't want to play for a Greg Roman type of offense, especially with the commitment to running the football. But even now, like the Chargers have already thrown it as many times this year with Justin Herbert as they did last year. So they're throwing it just as much, even though they're running it, because they're staying on the field at a better rate this year. But I think the other big thing is just the protection and game planning has really killed them too. Like he's not getting kind of the designer looks that you're seeing for some of your favorite receivers. Because like I know that Ladd McConkey at his size isn't going to always be able to do the kind of alpha male AJ Brown, type of things that some of these guys can do. But there's no reason to me he can't be Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Or be used in a similar way for someone who's not a big receiver either, right? And look at all the kind of designer touches that guy gets. Like
a lot.
He could be more involved game plan wise, and Greg Roman could do more to help him. But I think really the big part of this is like where Ladd McConkey thrived last year was on those intermediate routes, those 13 to 17-ish yard routes where he's doing great in cuts in the middle of the field, and they're, able to hit him there, give him that kind of running start, and let him do, what he does after the catch. When I was watching the tape, one thing you're going to see if you do is there are plenty of times where Ladd McConkey is getting open, and at the top of his break, Justin Herbert is either getting pressured and flushed out of the pocket, or he's getting hit. So I think that's just another thing with no Rashawn Slater, no Joel. I think that is also kind of hurting the quality of the targets that he's getting.
There's no question about that. I mean, just, hey, no matter how good of a route runner you are, if you can't get to the part of the field that you need to access in your route, then it doesn't matter if you're open or not. If Justin Herbert can't get the ball to you, then, everybody's going to suffer. And everybody had suffered on the offensive side from the receiver standpoint, from the running back standpoint. Everybody has suffered with the inability of the offensive line to open up holes on the running game and to pass protect and give Justin Herbert just that extra second. Justin Herbert's a magician, and he's done a great job of extending plays and trying to keep plays alive. But, that's more scramble drill stuff and less, schematic, right, in nature, because, you design plays and set them up to take a certain amount of time. And if you don't have that time, and then you don't have the timing on the route for the quarterback and the receiver to make that connection.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other part of it too is just kind of the roles that other players have landed in, right? Like the deep shots are going to Quentin Johnston.
Yeah.
The screen passes, little touch passes, stuff set up for Yak are going to Quentin Johnston or Trey Harris, right? A lot of those quick slants and things like that on third down are going to Keenan Allen. So I think it's just kind of the roles that everyone's been getting, and his role is tough because you're not just throwing it up there, right? It's very timing based. It's very in the middle of the field. Another thing is other teams know what's coming because that's what he did so well and killed them last year. Another thing teams are doing this year, trying to get more physical with him. He's not a huge dude. Then that, if they're going to let him play, that's always going to be a disadvantage for someone at Ladd's size. But still think he's a great receiver. Still think he can be the best receiver on a really good offense. He still has all of that skill set. So not anything I'm concerned about. I think it's more of a circumstance than it is actually something to be really concerned about. But speaking of concern, it's always the Chargers offensive line. But Zion Johnson quietly has probably been the Chargers' best offensive lineman in 2025. So we're going to get into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. The NFL season is in full swing, and there's nothing like being at the game, the crowd noise, the energy, and cheering alongside other fans. And I want to shout out to Chargers fans who, from all accounts, really brought it in that last game against the Texans. And truthfully, I believe was a big part of why the Chargers were able to stick into that game and be able to fight back the way that they did, even if they didn't get the job done. So shout out to the Bolt fam. But the frustrating thing with getting tickets has always been waiting in queues, dealing with logins, and watching prices change right at checkout. And that's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans, because it's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. And I know some of you could be deciding to go travel to an NFL playoff game and see the Chargers and potentially Justin Herbert's first playoff win. And when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're getting the best price. That's why with Game Time, the fees are included up front, so the price you see is exactly what you pay. And they also have zone deals, so you can pick the section and Game Time picks the seats and you save even more. But you also know that your tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee, which gives you some real peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. Dave, we still have more to get into because we did want to open it up to the Bolt fam for a Chargers mailbag today because it is the middle of the week. And I do have some ones I think that are really good that we need to get into, including this one here that we have from Lewis Benjamin, who says, is Zion Johnson good now? AQ Shipley, who I think makes frequent appearances on the Pat McAfee show, seems to like his stuff. Never hear his name called by commenters, which I guess is a good thing. Out of 6 draft picks the Chargers have next year, is 3 O-line picks too many? David, I think he brings up a good point here because I think in the kind of dumpster fire the Chargers offensive line has been, it's easy to kind of miss that Zion Johnson hasn't been the main reason, and has been a pretty steady hand on an offensive line that has been trying to put out fires all year.
Yeah, one thing that you can always commend Zion Johnson on and that you should commend him on is this guy posts. He shows up and he plays every single game. He has played over 1,000 snaps in every single season that he's been in the NFL. So first and foremost, got to have a big shout out for his durability. He's been able to stay on the field. But yes, he has played better this season. He has the least amount of pressures that he's given up. Last few years it was 33 pressures each. He's only allowed 26 pressures, and also the least amount of sacks that he's given up in his career, only 3 according to PFF. So it's not a mirage. Your eyes are not deceiving you. Zion Johnson is playing the best quality football of his career here in 2025.
Yeah, and I think it's important that he hasn't really had any big disaster games. Like, there's only been one game all season that he's allowed, more than 3 pressures, right, in a game. Yeah. So, it hasn't been, single-handedly bad where it's costing you the game, right? I still think he has moments, on stunts, and just deciding who to help, that can be really frustrating at times, and it's just hard to kind of parse where those issues are, or who are making those identifications and telling everyone who they're supposed to be blocking. They don't look like a well-coached team, at least as far as getting guys right onto who they're supposed to be on. Just way too many in the running game and the passing game. Way too many guys with wide open holes to run through, right? And just not getting hit by any lineman. Now, in the last game, he did have a couple pancakes, which I love to see, pulling truck stick to a few different Texans defenders, which, there's a lot to like about what he's put on tape this year. And, numbers-wise, 18th in pass blocking efficiency per Pro Football Focus of anyone with at least 200 pass blocking snaps this season. 43rd in pass blocking grade, 26th in pressures allowed, with 1 being the most pressures allowed. And Mekhi Becton's up there, but 3rd. So it has been great. It's not Pro Bowl, anything like that, but it's been solid, and they've needed him to be solid, and it just hasn't been enough to kind of save the rest of, what that offensive line has been so far. And I know at the we couldn't get the voicemails to work, but he asked if the Chargers should re-sign Zion Johnson to a 2-year extension. Something, David, that I don't think I ever thought we would be having the conversation about, honestly. But at least, for him, after getting his 5th-year option decline, like at least now it's a conversation.
Yeah, it definitely is a conversation for me. I feel like, going into this season, there was a lot of inconsistency in his play, but I feel like he's been more consistent this year. I mean, I think it was definitely a mission of his to be able to show like he can be a steady, consistent force at the guard position, and I feel like that mission was accomplished for him. And a lot of offensive lines need that, including the Chargers. Obviously, a lot of work to be done there, but I feel like Zion Johnson, to me, is somebody that can be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Well, the thing is, like, if you don't bring him back, who will be back on that team that you like? And we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I think the problem is the theory is just that, like, it's not going to be a 2-year deal. He's not going to take that for, pre-draft
not with
priors,
his age. Yeah.
Where he's been able to do, having maybe his best season this year. Yeah, it's going to be a 4-year deal. And based on what the numbers were last year for some of those guys who signed huge deals, it's hard to say that his won't be, more than what you're expecting right now. But we do have this one from Big Gio, who asked a very prominent question here, which is, will the Chargers have 3 new starting interior offensive linemen with Slater and Alt coming back, which is crazy because we had this conversation last year. David, do you think it could be 3 new guys in 2026?
Lord God, please. I've been sitting here for the 3rd straight year in a row begging them to make more changes on the offensive line. They've had the resources last year. They're going to have the resources again this year. I am going to sit here and tell you that I think they will finally get the message after they will have another year where they have issues meeting the ultimate goal, which is winning the Super Bowl, because of the issues that they never corrected on the offensive line. I feel like you can't do it a 3rd time. Like, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me 3 times. The only person you need to blame is yourself. Like, that's just the way it is. So I feel like they have to make the changes. It's clear and obvious. I don't think it'll all be in the draft. They're going to have an incredible amount of cap space. They have to get things done in free agency as well. But yeah, I feel like this is the year where they will bring in multiple new starters on the offensive line.
Well, the question is 3, right? So obviously,
yeah, I'm going to say yes.
You're saying all 3, so no Zion either.
Well, no, yeah, I'm gonna pull back on that one. I'm gonna say at least 2. I do like the fact of them bringing back Zion.
So the thing is you only have Mekhi Becton and Bradley Bozeman under contract next year. Zion's not under contract, right? So you'll save some money by potentially releasing Becton and Bradley Bozeman, but that leaves you with 0 guys under contract that you want back next year. I mean, we went into last year saying 2 out of 3. They tried to improve one of them with Mekhi Becton, and that hasn't really been an improvement. So it has to be a much better effort. This year, the focus was weapons. Next year, the focus has to be the offensive line. It should have been better last year, which I think what Macho Libre is saying here when he says, do Ortiz and Harbaugh really deserve so much criticism regarding the offensive line? I know it looks bad, but if we drafted more, we wouldn't have Hampton or Trey Harris or Oronde Gadsden, Jamari Caldwell, or R.J. Mickens. Could have gotten free agents, but those contracts were insane, and a lot of them aren't panning out. If we had Alton Slater, it wouldn't look so bad. I agree, but the problem is going into it thinking that your 2 tackles would bail out the other improvements that you didn't have on the interior of the offensive line and having that come back to haunt you in a gigantic way. Let's not forget that this team at one point was potentially planning on starting Zion Johnson at center and Bradley Bozeman at left guard because they didn't have any better options, and they knew that it wasn't right the way it was last year and tried to teach a guy an entirely new position. So yes, they absolutely deserve criticism. It wasn't ever going to be perfect, and I'm glad they got the weapons that they did, but it had to be better than what they put out there, because I'm sure you guys have seen the Tyler Schoen tweet that's been circulating Twitter. Through 17 games, this is where the Chargers rank. ESPN pass block win rate 32nd, run block win rate 31st. Pro Football Focus pass blocking efficiency 30th, pass blocking grade 31st, run blocking 32nd. They're the worst offensive line in the league. So like, if losing your 2 stars is hard to get over, but at the same time, then it's hugely on your coaching staff. If it's not in the front office, if it's not on Jim Harbaugh, It's Mike Devlin. It's Greg Roman not being able to do more with what they had. And like credit to Joe Ortiz, who at least tried to go bring in an Austin Deculus, tried to bring in Trevor Penning. I appreciate the effort. But honestly, through 2 years now, outside of Joe Alt, we just don't really have any confirmation that this team can draft or sign starting level offensive linemen or identify them, right? Whether it's the pro club scouting, they're not identifying it right. If it's the Greg Roman input or Mike Devlin input, it's not right. So as much as I understand what you're saying, it would look a lot better if you had your 2 tackles. You assuming you'd have both those guys for the entire season and not doing enough on your interior, 100% on them. Do you agree?
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater are phenomenal. I mean, 2 at the very best at their position in the NFL. And yeah, they're going to make a lot of lesser players look a lot better because of how good they are, because they're force multipliers on the offensive line. But that doesn't mean that it takes away from the issues that were already there, that we knew was there, that they never corrected.
100%. And we're going to talk about a couple of more players that have improved, but the offensive line hasn't nearly improved enough. So I'm going to tell you why I think Quentin Johnston is up there for the most improved player on the Chargers, and defensively, Tuli Tuipulotu has just had a monster season. We're getting to those guys and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Well, we still have more Chargers mailbag to get into here, and we have a really good one from Instagram that I want to talk about because it's one conversation that I don't think we've had this year, and this we get today from Durd the Nerd, who's asking, who would you consider to be the Chargers' most improved offensive and defensive players? David, I saw you nodding along. We can start offensive here. I think there's an argument to be made, maybe a couple arguments you could make. But I think it'd be hard to not go with Quentin Johnston as far as who has improved the most from 2024 to 2025.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the number one on my list. I do have another option that I'm going to offer as well outside of Quentin, but I mean, you can't watch the tape in 2025 and not be able to see the obvious improvements in his game. His ability to track the ball over his shoulder has greatly improved. His ability to go up and get the football in a contested catch situation has improved. His ability to just straight up catch the ball with his hands has greatly improved. His route running has gotten crisper. His releases have gotten quicker and faster and more sudden. He has become a much more complete wide receiver in 2025. You have to be blind to see anything otherwise. My other option is Kaimani Vidal. Huge improvement in 2025 after starting his career off with a touchdown. Did not have a very good rookie season. In his sophomore season, he was invaluable to the Chargers offense. When Amarian Hampton went down, they needed his performances. Over 600 yards rushing, a couple of 100-yard rushing games. He was a big part of the offense and a major improvement in 2025.
Yeah, 100%. And I also had Kamani Vidal as well, just as someone who has to get mentioned when you're having this conversation. I mean, from weeks 5 through 14, every week that Amarian Hampton missed, and then also the week that he got back where he still had a big game against the Eagles, he put up an average of over 86 yards from scrimmage. To get that from a guy that was cut this year, right? To get that from a guy who wasn't able to really produce anything in his opportunities as a rookie is great. I think also big strides in pass protection as well should be pointed out too. Kamani Vidal, awesome. But yeah, I mean, last year, Quentin Johnston had an open rating on the ESPN analytics for receiver grades of 9 out of 100.
Yikes.
It was ranked for last place, tied with Dontavian Wicks out of 116 receivers that were eligible for it. This year he ranks 50, or his grade is 53, which ranks 46th, which is the top half of the
difference.
league. Yeah, no, I mean, you're top, 46, 47% of the league, which for him specifically is gigantic, right? I think the other thing that's, crazy to think about, Quentin Johnston, to your point, contested catches in 2025, 52.4% of his contested targets he has been able to bring in. That's crazy. It ranks 25th in the NFL of anyone with at least 50 targets. Awesome. I mean, that's such a big improvement from the Quentin Johnston that we saw last season. I mean, you needed him to make more tough catches, and I don't think it'll ever
play
be
like a big receiver.
The calling card of his game. I don't believe that, but I would say that like he's usable in those situations now, and like he's so much better than he was last year, which is exactly why he has to be mentioned in this, most improved. I mean, last year he caught 35% of his contested catch targets, right? This year, over 50%. The 50-50 balls going more in the favor of Quentin Johnston this year, which is really awesome to see. And we've seen him make some tough catches, and he has like less drops than, Oronde or Ladd or Keenan Allen so far this year. So that should, absolutely be thought of when you're talking about Quentin Johnston and the narrative that he has bad hands at this point. But defensively, this one was pretty straightforward to me. We talked about Kamani Vidal having his argument. Justin Aboigbe, I think, would be a guy, because he played so little last year, that is so much improved. But it has to go to Tuli Tuipulotu, David, because he's just been one of the better edge rushers in the league in 2025.
This was going to be the big year for him, right? This was the big moment in his career where he was waiting in the wings, waiting for his opportunity, waiting to be the number one guy, waiting to show that he was capable of being the number one guy. And he absolutely did that in 2025. Over 13 sacks. Tuli is a monster. I mean, we always knew he was really good in running and run support, and we knew he had flashes. He had these games where he could go on a tear for 2 or 3 games, but then he would disappear. So what we were looking for in 2025 was the consistent ferocity throughout the season, and he showed it, and he earned himself a big-time payday that's going to be coming his way. I think everybody needs to remember, Tuli is 23 years old. He is going to get paid an unbelievable amount of money, and he earned it after this fantastic breakout 2025 season.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because this next offseason is the first season the Chargers can offer him an extension. So, at 13 sacks, already, ranking 5th in the NFL so far this year, it's going to be hard to think you're going to get a huge discount on that deal. But 9th in the NFL in pressures so far this year was 70. Also 4th in the NFL in tackles for loss with 20. That means he has 33 combined tackles for losses and sacks, and only, basically averaging 2 of those per game. So that's crazy. He's been awesome so far this year. I don't know if he's ever going to have like the cleanest like win percentage or, pass rush win rate. His PRP score is top 10, which is cool. But I do think that the effort that he plays with makes up for a lot of that too. And I think you're seeing that in an ability to finish those chances that he wasn't able to finish last year when he had 8.5 sacks. Those chances are getting finished so far this year. I think having an Odafe Owe, having Khalil Mack obviously helps that, gives him some more opportunities to shine a little bit and let that motor shine by flushing dudes out of the pocket or forcing them to step up, whatever the case may be. But Tuli's been awesome. Hopefully, the Chargers can still get him at not like it's interesting because usually when you have edge rushers like that, it's like you're either like the top paid at your position in the league, right? Or there's a huge gap after that. So I'm really interested to see what those numbers. Yeah. And especially because he's still under contract there next year, no matter what. But let's get to this last one here so we can put this kind of headline to bed a little bit, because we have this from Jennifer Miller Greenwall on Facebook, who says, what are the chances of Joe Alt being activated for the playoffs? I don't know why this started all of a sudden, but I'll just say it simply, not really any. Like there's nothing that has all indicated that Joe Alt can make a return from for the playoffs. The only thing we know is the Chargers announcing basically that he was getting a season-ending injury, and I'm sure when they put that out there, they were also accounting for the fact that they could be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I understand it, guys. Like, Joe Alt's a monster. He's an absolute beast, and you want anything and anyone you could possibly get back to help this Chargers offensive line and Justin Herbert get just a little extra time. Yeah. But unfortunately, it is not going to be Joe Alt. That is done. He's not coming back. That ship has sailed, unfortunately.
The other thing is like, even if he could, he's already had 2 injured reserve stints this season, right? Like, I don't think that that's something that they would ever kind of put in jeopardy with, especially how well he was playing. I mean, he made the Pro Bowl in 6 games, which is going to cost the Chargers more money now on his 5th-year option,
Yep.
which is great. And honestly, probably, truly, that tells me he absolutely could have won Protector of the Year. Had he stepped in for Rashawn Slater and played as well as he played in the 6 games we got to see him, especially the 4 games he played fully, he probably would have been the Protector of the Year, which is pretty crazy because that's what we were talking about before the season. But
yeah.
the only reason I think that this could be going around, I did see that Jesse Morse, MD, someone very famous on Twitter for kind of trying to diagnose or guess what the timelines are for players to come back, based on his own experiences, said that he thought that Rashawn Slater would be done for sure for the season, whereas Joe Alt could make a return in late January. I don't even know, what this specific injury is. We didn't even know that Omarion Hampton had a fractured ankle until he came back, 8 weeks later, and we're like, oh, hey, that seems like a long time for a sprained ankle. It's like, well, actually, it was fractured,
the mafia of the Chargers likes to keep things very silent on the injury front.
Yeah, no, they do. So I wouldn't get your hopes up for anything. I don't think they had to actually put he is season ending, but if that is the case, it could be over already. I just think that there's no chance that he's coming back as much as we all would love him to. I'm not exactly sure why that all of a sudden started gaining some steam. It kind of got me excited a little bit. I was like, hey, is there someone saying something out there that I haven't seen? Because remember when Rashawn Slater in 2022
what have I missed?
Came back for that Jaguars playoff game, there was rumblings where I was like, hey, if the Chargers can beat the Jaguars, he might be able to come back the next week and rejoin the team, and they never made it that far. But we haven't heard anything credible at all about Joe Alt. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news is I'll be back with you guys tomorrow for crossover Thursday, Locked On Chargers, Locked On Broncos, in a game that's a little bit interesting because it's going to be Trey Lance and company taking on a Broncos team going for the number 1 seed. Can Trey Lance play spoiler? Did they mess it up anyways? Would that actually mess the Chargers up and accidentally get themselves a date with the Jaguars in the first round? There's a lot to get into, so make sure you guys are back for that. But to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media, where you can also hit us up for these fan shows, including the bold predictions that we'll do on Friday. Should be some fun ones with some players that aren't usually on there. You can do that or call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 and give us your 30-second Chargers question, buy or sell, or bold prediction on there. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow. It's going to be a different kind of show. I'll be with Sarah Bedinger for this crossover Thursday edition. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.